Sorry for that extended opening, guys. Alberto is running around here someplace. I just heard that he's very close to our video stream. However, in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll jump into our lecture. We'll come back and we'll welcome Alberto to the show. But in a few minutes when we come back, we'll be talking about Starlink. We'll be talking about how it's really like changing the way that RIZQ itself is operating their business. So with that, I'm going to jump into birthday attacks. So this is going to be part of a What Is series on cyber threats, cyber scams, the specialty knowledge in the cybersecurity industry. There's this concept called the birthday attack. Now, this one's personal to me. I happen to be married to someone who's born on the same day as me, and so we're both we both share a birthday in March. Seems quite strange, except for the little bit of mathematician in me understands that this isn't quite as unusual as it sounds, and unfortunately, in cryptography, it's a real problem we have to worry about. So, unfortunately, the more unique numbers that you put together for individual items of data, particularly if they're randomly generated, the more likely they are going to overlap and be the exact same number. And attackers can actually take advantage of this to break the way a system is supposed to be secured. So that's a birthday attack. Before we jump into birthday attacks, let's just talk about hashing algorithms real quick. So I think many of you have probably heard of a hashing algorithm or a cryptographic hash, sometimes what's called a one-way function or one-way cryptography. What we are talking about is a piece of code that plain text goes into, or unencrypted data, it's not always text, goes into, and what comes out the other side is a hash that you can use to uniquely validate that the data is as you expect. So I'll talk more about specific ciphers in a moment, but just to give an example here, I put together a little chart talking about the worst one-way cryptographic function I could think of. So we have the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. For any font geeks out there, one of the unique things about that sentence is it uses every letter of the English alphabet. However, if we ran our hash function over it, which is alphabetize all the characters and truncate after the 8th character, what you get is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Change that sentence to the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog and stole his dinner. Different sentence, different data. Same cryptographic function. What you will find is the same hash text. So, I mean, this is a problem for a poorly designed hash function, and unfortunately, there's many older hash functions that, while they may not have been poorly designed when they were invented 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago or more, today they can be defeated quite easily by attackers. So what do we do about this? So the way this works is an attacker can generate multiple inputs, and they can just subtly change those inputs and rerun the hash function over and over and over again until, by brute force or by frequency, they eventually end up with a collision. And the goal of an attacker, hey Alberto, the goal of an attacker is to create two pieces of data that, when you go through the encrypted function, what comes out the other end is the same thing, exactly like our worst hash function ever, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Attackers can do this with many of what we previously thought of as secure functions. And it's not even that difficult. This is something that can be scripted up quite easily for some of the weaker functions. And even some of the moderately strong functions with cloud computing. I've heard that you can defeat an MD5 function for about the cost of like a bouncy ball that you'd buy, your kid would stick a quarter in a machine, like that's about the cost of defeating an MD5 function these days. The solution is to use longer bit depth or collision resistance. Usually that means a longer hash, but it could also mean a stronger hash function. Sometimes you can salt. People do this in passwords. And then, of course, to stay up to date on your cryptographic protocols, don't invent your own, too. I want to talk over some cases where this has actually become a problem in the past, and even some cases that you need to worry about in the wild right now today. So, unfortunately, I still see MD5 hashes all over the place. People use these to verify that like some kind of like binary image or data is as expected. Sometimes they're still published on the web as proof that the file that you downloaded is the original file. Unfortunately, they're incredibly easy to defeat. They were broken back in 2004. Leading up to that, it was clear they were going to be broken soon, because what happens is the big math geeks out there figure out ways to take shortcuts in attacking these things. And each mathematician works on the progress of people that came before them until someone can make the math problem simple enough that they could then defeat it using some brute force. And so that happened with MD5 in 2004, and only a couple years later, it was weaponized to the point where I think it was back in 2012 that the cost was something like 50 cents US to defeat MD5. I'm sure today it's, even with inflation, I'm sure it's less than that. So if you still see MD5 out there, just dump anything that's using that. SHA-1. SHA-1 replaced MD5 as the go-to cryptographic function. Unfortunately, same thing. We saw that weakening over the 2010s, and by 2017, it was broken. And at this point, relatively easy to crack. Crime gangs can crack this. Unfortunately, while it is expensive to crack, it's still going to be in use until 2030. So NIST has given companies a few years to shift off of that. Where you're supposed to be shifting to is something stronger. So we're looking at SHA-256, SHA-2 256, SHA-2 512 256, or SHA-3 256. These all have similar collision resistance, and you guys can go check out the guidance at NIST if you're looking for something a little bit better than that. So if you see anything with MD5 in it, run. It's not safe at all. SHA-1, bit dated at this point. We should be getting off of it. I want to talk about two things that are still out in the wild right now. PGP and GPG key servers. So this technology has been the gold standard in private encryption since the 1990s. It was really the first mass market encryption product that was used by anyone that wasn't a government. It's still the gold standard in encryption. Unfortunately, this worldwide network of key servers that exists, the software that was written to run these key servers was written in the 90s, hasn't been updated much since, and the protocol has not changed. And part of that protocol is that they used shortened version of these of the key signatures to identify the keys on the key servers. And what that means is you can't trust the key IDs on any of the PGP or GPG key servers around the world. So while PGP is still a secure encryption method, the tiny little key IDs are not particularly secure. One more, and this one's like has a bit more of a mass market problem space, which is that Git was built off SHA-1, still uses SHA-1. We should be moving beyond that soon. But to make that really dangerous, almost every implementation of Git until a few years ago, and many of them today still, and this is a big no-no, again, just like PGP, they shortened the hash for the commit ID. So they used SHA-1, which is this incredibly strong collision resistance. It's supposed to be about 100 bits or a little more of collision resistance, and they shortened that down to 7 or 8 hex characters to make it easy to type and view rather than 40. But what that means is that you can actually create collisions in Git repositories, and this is particularly a problem because unfortunately, with all the open source projects that are out on the internet, there are many ways to take advantage of this collision potential to sneak code into places where it shouldn't be. So if you're using a tool chain that depends on Git, make sure your SCM is using the longer commit IDs, and make sure the tools you're using are using the longer commit IDs. So that's it on birthday attacks. I'm going to go back to the intro of the show because we now have our guest of honor here, Alberto. Before I get into that, I'm curious, Alberto, do you still see MD5 in the wild? Like every time I see it, I want to cry. Oh, we don't have your mic. We just have video. He's got to click the things. No. And I'm hoping it's not me, guys. We'll give Alberto a minute to figure that out. I wonder if I have to do something here. We skipped the green room experience. So I've got a backup lecture here. I'm going to jump in while Alberto's fighting his audio game. Quick update here, guys. The National Vulnerability Database has 262,000, almost 263,000 vulnerabilities in its database as of today. This has been growing. The amount of vulnerabilities added every month has been growing year after year. In fact, the NVD is having trouble keeping up on triage of all these vulnerabilities. But I am going to go through a quick 101. What is a software vulnerability? So, really fast version, before we jump into what is a vulnerability, let's talk about the words that surround a vulnerability. There's a little bit of a glossary here. A threat, which is an actor that can cause a loss. An exploit, which is, we hear about attackers using exploits. They're usually bits of reusable code. There's Alberto. I can hear his sound.
Testing?
Yeah, we got you.
Yes, we're here. All right.
So I teased it, so I'm going to do the little miniature version here. A threat actor exploits a vulnerability to impact a loss in an asset. So, and then once the attackers get in there, they then move laterally through a network between assets, and they escalate privileges to create their losses. So that's a little 101 on the vocab here. How was your trek across the island here, Alberto? I think before I introduce you, let's just back up and talk about today's subject. So we're here on the MSP roundtable. Today is it's not exactly Starlink Day because we're not going to get into the technology that backs that wonderful magical experience, but we are going to talk about like this disruptive change, and you're like living it right now, right? Because you're down in Puerto Rico. So what is your average day when you're moving around this space, which is much different than, most of our partners are moving around either large cities or small cities, and they're circling around on the surface streets, but your experience is a little different, right?
Well, yeah. So being in Puerto Rico obviously I think Puerto Rico is a very good case study for the world around like what it is like to operate critical IT infrastructure in very, very fragile infrastructure. And I'm not just talking communications. I know we're going to talk Starlink a little bit, but power, right? So there's a lot of issues around power distribution in Puerto Rico. So there's a lot of rolling blackouts and situations with power delivery, and that obviously affects everybody, right? So across the board, even telco companies. So everybody around in Puerto Rico has to always uh, be aware of these situations and prepare for them at every level. So it becomes an interesting place to work in IT due to this. And before we get started, I in no way, shape, or form represent SpaceX or Starlink or anything. We don't get anything from talking about Starlink. We don't sell it. And as an MSP, right, we don't really focus too much on selling products and licenses. So RIZQ is a company that's an MSP that's purely focused on the service part of the MSP acronym, right? So we're really just big fans of finding solutions like Starlink that are working surprisingly well in the enterprise space, right? There's some limitations, and we can get into all the details that you want, Matt, but getting intros out of the way, right? That's what RIZQ is, and we try to find good solutions for everybody. And we're big fans of this because of many reasons.
All right. Well, we'll get into the tech in a few minutes, but you're in this space in Puerto Rico. You've got you run Risk. You've been operating that company for a
15 years.
15 years. Okay, so that's a substantial amount of time. What led you to today? How did you start the company? When did you decide to hang a shingle?
Hmm.
What led you to that point, and what has that been like for the last 15 years? I mean, and I think that your story is familiar to a lot of the people that watch, but also the geography you're in is different, so the industry is a little different.
Hmm. So, long story short, I was in a company that was doing MSP style services for a long time, since the early 2000s. I branched out and quit, put in my letter of resignation, and started RIZQ around 2009. My last employer is currently a customer, and very good, loyal customer as well. So we've been running 15 years, trying to bring the high level enterprise knowledge from already having experience from working in manufacturing and healthcare in that space, but bring that knowledge to the small and medium business. Like, the small and medium businesses is the bread and butter of MSP. Small and medium business owners don't have any IT knowledge, or they need somebody like us, right, to entrust to guide their solutions. So, and we're big fans of fixing complex problems and RIZQ. So that's really has been our trajectory for the past 15 years, is just finding the best solutions around for our customers. And it's been a wild ride. It's been an interesting experience, right? This growth process the past 15 years, and obviously we've expanded into the cybersecurity space for the past I don't know, 6 7 years, and we have strong
Hmm.
partnerships around that. But yeah, so one of the biggest subjects that as MSPs we have to deal with is backup and disaster recovery. How do we keep people connected? And maybe 10 years ago, it was always a matter of, okay, get the systems online at the premises, right? Turn on the generator, get a connection on somehow going and connect to our servers. And things have obviously changed a lot in the past years with the cloud and all that. So just getting an internet connection gets us to everything that we need. So as long as you have some sort of power to turn on one of these dishes, you're good to go, right? So it's and it
Well, we'll get to the dishes in a minute. I want to talk about what makes your geography unique here, and the marketplace a little bit unique. So, first of all, congratulations on that. Uh, I guess like spin out experience, because I think most people when they start their most MSP owners, like practice owners, when they start their business, right? They're usually starting from zero. They usually have to they're usually many of them are technical. Most of them start technically, and they
Mhm.
usually have to leave their technical organization, never to be seen from again, and they have to start from scratch. So congratulations on that transition. It's a testament to I think the trust that they placed in you, that they
Mhm.
were willing to experiment with externalizing what was an internal function to a company that didn't exist, right? And I think a lot of your peers have to struggle for a couple of years to get that credibility to be able to accomplish something like that. So that's really great. But you're in this marketplace where I know you said, well, 10 years ago, yeah, we were all on prem, right? And I think most of us mainlanders, whether we're in in Europe or the UK or North America, and I know UK is an island, but like they've got strong infrastructure on that island. They're not getting knocked out by hurricanes, right? Or Australia, right? We have strong grids. We have like this tight network, and over the last, and I would say it's a little bit longer than 10 years, 15 years. I think there's been a lot of consolidation of data centers. First, we went to co-location facilities, secure data centers that where you co-located, and rather than having your servers be in a local data closet accessible by the person who sweeps the floors, now it's in a secure facility. But then we went to the cloud, right? And that really grew up. It wasn't really any like amazing revolution in how to build data centers. It was really this availability of high speed fiber that was available in more and more places around the world. And not that there's not fiber connecting your island. However, the interior of Puerto Rico, right? You guys have really strong infrastructure basically in one place on the island, right? And
Well,
when
let's say
how does that?
so I mean, I can't speak for the entire telco industry, and I'm not a telco myself,
Well, but
but
you've seen what happens,
I've
right?
seen a
Like,
lot of things, right? So there's strong infrastructure since Maria. Of course, there's been a lot of federal investment on the island, and a lot of companies have taken advantage of that. Mainly, like on the mobile space, has been T-Mobile. T-Mobile used Puerto Rico as one of their first places to like deploy the next gen 5G. So everywhere I drive around, at least on the borders of Puerto Rico, on the outside, not in the mountainous areas, I get really strong 5G, 300 to 400 megs, and it's really good. And there's been a lot of fiber deployment all over the island for the past, upwards years. But there's a strong dependence on maybe two or three, major fiber owners, and there's a lot of ISPs that crop up around that to subcontract last miles, and a lot of collaborations around there. And there's pretty strong fiber infrastructure. It's not on the telcos, and market side of fault. It's really more of a problem with power.
right.
And since there's such a strong issue with power, then you always have to be planning ahead and trying to, decipher who your last mile providers are to make sure that you actually have fiber coming into that building from separate, mainline
So
owners.
wait, let's just talk about that for a second. How that's different. So I'm in upstate New York. We have winter storms and stuff gets knocked down, but basically the central grid functions continue to function. And if you're in a city, the fiber is pretty reliable. I mean, a lot of it's underground. And even during a major storm here in the mainland, like they just beam power in from someplace else, and they've got all this diversity. Yeah. So when the power goes down or where they roll blackups, like the generator spins up, I think we all understand like, okay, diesel generator, that'll keep the servers ticking, right? But like basically you're in an isolated island of technology, right? Because the server room's spinning up, right? However, there may be no internet connection and no possibility of an internet connection, right? And in a major storm, even with the internet diversity, right, basically the fiber multiplexers out there on, wherever they are, like a mile away, right, for two different carriers could be the same power like junction box, right? So they're just both down during a storm, everything's down. And so I think you've actually had a pretty challenging situation over the last 10, 15 years while here on the mainland we've been throwing everything into the cloud. Actually, what that means is the market for on-prem stuff has got like the products aren't as good as they were 10, 15 years ago, actually.
Yeah, that's a balance for that in Puerto Rico. So not everybody. So obviously the cloud has its benefits. It's not that we don't use the cloud, but there's There's some loads where there's a strong resistance to go to the cloud because of the possibility of just having absolutely no access to the internet in a major storm situation. Like if we get another repeat like Maria, we haven't
Yeah.
had a repeat from Maria, and it's been a long time already, and we've taken a lot of learning lessons from that, and it was crazy, for Maria, and I think I speak on behalf of everybody in IT in Puerto Rico. It was very difficult, 6 to 12 months. There were areas that didn't get power for like 6 months. Um, Reception, even over fiber, was spotty at best. If you had like one of the major carriers, you might have some luck, but even then, you would notice when diesel generators would run out of fuel, and you would spend like an hour or two offline, and you would notice your fiber come back online because diesel was being spread around. So it was a very challenging time, and in that regard, it's not we have improved, but it's just the whole situation of having dependencies for the
Well,
for
so this is changing right now, though. So I mean, I think in the circles that I mostly travel, this changed around 8 years ago, 8, 10 years ago. People started trusting the cloud, and I think today in most of the world, people should and they usually do trust the cloud, whether they should or shouldn't. Right?
Mhm, mhm,
They usually do trust the cloud more than they trust the things in their building because
mhm,
they know how vulnerable those things are. You're
mhm,
at a little bit of a transition moment here.
mhm.
So, do small business owners trust like stuff that lives in the cloud right now? Is that
You'll see most small business owners are like purely SaaS and purely cloud based. That's already a trend in small businesses, but you'll still see a lot of resistance from like major enterprise. Like
yeah?
you won't hospitals will use private cloud that is probably hosted locally for
Hmm.
for latency reasons, and some major enterprise will still hold a lot of on-prem, and not go fully cloud based because of reasons, because
So now entering Starlink, right? Which when did that become available? When was the first time you saw one of those things in person nearby?
So we started seeing Starlink like about a year and a half, 2 years ago in Puerto Rico, residentially. And
Hmm.
initially, I just helped out a bunch of VIPs that their customers of mine and are asking for redundancies at home, and I've been throwing dishes in their premises. And just recently, it started becoming available as a business service. Starlink has a business division that's also been opened in Puerto Rico for the past, I don't know, few months. It's not been a long time, but it's offering public IPs that we can use. They're not static yet, so that's one strong limitation. And there's obviously a limitation in upload. So if you're trying to host something, upload speeds are still kind of slow. But if you have your solar
Well,
panels and battery
let's
and
let's
generator.
put slow in context here.
Hmm.
I think what you mean is we can't beam our whole data center backups to the cloud, right?
No,
That's what you mean.
no, you
But
wouldn't be able to.
like we can do this thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Like the business can operate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd be online and working. You just can't like fully host critical applications that require a lot of bandwidth through there.
But maybe those applications can now live in the cloud. So,
Exactly. But if you're on the
right?
cloud, then you have absolutely no problem.
So
No.
so
Mhm,
this is a big change,
mhm,
which is like I think maybe it was unexpected because without SpaceX, right? It just would have been a continued reliance on batteries, generators,
mhm,
virtual servers. While the rest of the world's moving to SaaS, right?
mhm.
Like you're trapped in this different era of infrastructure. But that's changing rapidly now, and I'm going to bet I'm going to bet people were using residential Starlink, as emergency in businesses before it,
Oh
they
yeah.
had the business product,
Oh yeah.
but now they have the business product. So where is this? It goes up into space and it punches down. Where is the pop in Puerto Rico, or is it pop up on the mainland? You have no
No,
idea.
Starlink's infrastructure is completely out in space. There's nothing locally on the
Yeah.
island. It's completely
So
over the dishes.
I mean, even maybe. I mean, what happens during a hurricane? Are these connections like down completely?
Well, obviously there's limitations with cloud cover and that. So if cloud cover is way too thick, obviously you won't get a connection or it'll be super slow, right? Just like with satellite TV. But generally, just if it's normally raining or like a regular day, you'll see upwards of 100 megs even while it's raining. And if it's a clear, cloudless day, you'll see 300 to 400 megs easily.
So the storm comes through. Everyone sort of freaks out on an island, right? I
Mhm.
I don't mean that like people are used to it, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like basically, you hunker
Everybody
down,
has their
you
protocol.
play you play cards, you drink beer, whatever you do during the storm, right? But like realistically, that's only a few hours, right?
Mhm.
And then the storm passes, and then like Starlink's up again, straight back to work. Meanwhile, like the people that don't have those connections, like they're cleaning up for days and like fighting for
Basically.
like yeah.
Basically, that
So
is the case. I mean, if you have Starlink right now and you have everything either on-prem or SaaS, and you have your on-prem turned on with either your solar panels, your batteries, or your generator, you're technically off grid, and you can still connect and do business as usual. And you can let the world, correct itself and get your mainline fibers connected whenever they get connected, but you'll still be able to work.
so in terms of enterprise strategy, it's still early days here, because I think businesses don't change that fast. But it sounds like this has enabled new buying patterns. It
Hmm.
sounds like maybe things like recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives are changing because I remember back before the cloud era,
Hmm.
you were if your systems got knocked out, you'd write 2 days on the paper, but it might take actually 2 weeks because like the
Hmm.
reality is most organizations don't actually test their recovery procedures. And like when it comes right down to it, if you haven't done that, that thing that you thought was only going to take a day or two like really takes a week or two.
Hmm.
um, so you're now leaving that era behind, right? And business owners are up really fast. Do you think this is changing infrastructure trust yet, or is this like still early days in Starlink? Has this is it? I don't like. It's not
Well,
exactly like caught on like wildfire where we are because we've got fiber around here.
yeah,
But
exactly. You don't have as strong a need. I mean, to be honest, I mean, they still have the hurdle to actually have a fully static IP. Until we can have fully static IPs and symmetrical bandwidth going up, which I don't know that it's not on their roadmap, not that I've heard. There's still some challenges to like fully entrust this to replace fiber. It
mhm,
can't yet. I still consider it as a backup solution, not as a main solution, because of that
mhm.
fact.
Okay.
And like
Well,
you can have a public IP, and that public IP officially is not static. But if you have fixed Starlink service and your dish doesn't move around, there's this low chance of your IP switching on you. But there's still a chance. So you can't like from an enterprise level build out an SD-WAN solution, for example, built on Starlink. It won't be reliable, not yet.
well, the I got bad news for you. Or maybe it's good news, which is clearly like the world's out of IPs, right? But the other
Mhm.
thing is that we're all moving into this era of zero trust, right?
Mhm.
And the WAN's sort of falling down because
Mhm.
for really good reason, which is that the inside of a corporate network really isn't that much more trustworthy, or in many cases less trustworthy than the open internet.
Mhm.
So in that era where the local network sort of breaks down a little bit, I mean, it probably won't matter in a few years. This public IP thing, right? Um,
Well, if you're talking SASE, right? That's pretty
yeah.
like the future, and we are working on SASE solutions, but we still find the SASE solutions need a static IP to like actually, open up their VPNs and do their magic in the back end. So if you don't have like static IPs that don't change, those chains can break. Um,
Well, the market's moving forward there.
it is. There's still stuff to test, I haven't really like thrown out a SASE solution on Starlink just yet to see how reliable it might be, but it's definitely a good place to have a lab.
Well, we forgot to ask for questions here, but if anyone's wondering about Starlink, I know not everyone's had hands-on. Feel free to throw a question in the chat on LinkedIn or YouTube. Um, what else? What else do you think is unique about the IT industry on an island? And what should we be thinking about?
Hmm. Well, I guess the biggest challenge Puerto Rico has is distribution. We're out here on a little tiny island in the center of the Caribbean. Everything either arrives by boat or by airplane, and that's probably the biggest challenge for MSPs in a geography like us, is trying to find stuff in stock to resolve problems quickly. That's a tough problem to fix. Amazon is doing some work on that. They're actually building a warehouse distribution center, their first one in Puerto Rico right now. It's probably going to take 3 or 4 more years before it's online. So that could help. There's a lot of good local companies that distribute IT equipment that try to do their best to keep something in stock on the island. But besides like power and all that, to me, that's my biggest pain point, is being able to respond really quickly to customers with their needs, and find products that I can
Well,
deploy
so
as fast as possible.
do you have to keep your own stock, or you really can rely on the distributors?
I'm relying on dropship distributors. At least that's my strategy. I'm not big enough to have my own warehouse, right? Not at
So,
that point
so
yet.
I mean, that just means that like you need to think really hard about lead times, which probably means a lot more advanced planning with your customers.
Hmm.
Probably a lot. The types of conversations all partners should really be having with their customers about, hey, what's happening next month? What's
Hmm.
happening 2 months from now? What's happening
Hmm.
3 months from now?
Hmm.
Um, because the reality is, you're not going to be able to overnight that whatever you need to back that person's
You can,
productivity.
you
You,
can,
you,
but pay up. You uh, sort of normal tickets that maybe you could receive as an MSP. Hey, by the way, we're hiring 30 people on Monday, and it's Monday before. It's 7 days out, and that's a
Mhm.
hard no to many times. That request comes down, is like, I can't comply. I don't have equipment on hand to be able to help you. We need to place an order, and it takes time. So yeah, that's a big challenge of working in an environment like ours.
All right. Well, I'm gonna put you on the spot for a moment, Alberto, because I heard a rumor that you were thinking about Trustmark. So,
Oh yeah.
what's been this is the CompTIA cybersecurity Trustmark.
Hmm.
Fort Mesa supporting readiness with CompTIA for solution providers that are looking to achieve this level benchmark that says that they've reached a level of maturity in cybersecurity. What's special about this trust mark is it's for technology service providers. In fact, there's not another measure in the world that's specific for technology service providers. So there's my pitch, there's my description. But what drove you, other than the fact that you know me, what attracted you to that idea?
Well, it's really the natural fact that we've pivoted into specializing in cybersecurity, and we're executing that in our customers. We're auditing them, with our partnership with you, and we're doing all that. And we obviously need to apply that to ourselves. We might be following procedures, we might be having our policies, and we have everything in place, and we're doing everything well. But I want to submit risk through the gauntlet of having obviously somebody like you run through me, honestly, and audit us, and have us prepared to have that trust mark signify how ready we are to attend our customers in that space.
Yeah, that's an important distinction here. So it's not just. I mean, it is an assessment. I'm gonna give a little bit of an insider's baseball secret to people that don't have like cyber in their title. Um, the largest reason you ask an organization to perform a risk assessment is not because you care what's in the report. It's because the act of going through a risk assessment forces an organization to confront all of their skeletons
Hmm.
and make reasonable decisions about them, or at least be aware of those skeletons. So for many service providers that maybe have even done this with clients before, this is for many of them the first time that they're being forced to confront their own skeletons. And I'm not saying that you have any. I haven't. We haven't been through the process yet
We haven't
together,
started yet. We haven't started yet.
but I know from working with other service providers, this is the first time that they've done this kind of activity. They're thinking about things that they never had to think about before. Um, And so the act of moving through the process, it's not just getting the stamp at the end. The fact that you've gone through the process means that you've been forced to do a lot of things that you weren't forced
Mhm.
to do before.
Mhm.
You have to make sure that you have to have governance in place,
Mhm.
which is usually what we think of as a set of policies, but they have to be approved. They have to be reviewed. Everyone needs to know what's going on. They need to be in alignment with your actual security that you have in place. You need to document all your security, which means you need to align like this idea of, well, I think I checked that box. Um, and maybe you did check that box 5 years ago, and then someone came in behind you and unchecked it, or maybe you got that was actually two firewalls ago that you thought you enabled that feature, right? Um, the act of collecting evidence sometimes forces a little bit of vigilance through all of your security processes, because the reality is you can build like really strong castle walls on three sides of your organization and leave the back door open, and an
Mhm.
attacker will find it, right?
Yep.
So I'm rooting for you through your process here.
So
Um,
am I. I mean, nobody likes to throw themselves into that process, but as you say, I mean, if we're in this space and we're asking for our customers to fully entrust us, I mean, having a CompTIA trust mark certified by an organization like Fort Mesa is going to obviously tell your customers that you care enough to care about yourself as well. And I'm all for it. I already
uh,
talked to CompTIA about it, and we're gonna put a date on that. We're gonna start very soon.
Awesome, awesome. And just to clarify, I don't Fort Mesa doesn't do the assessments here. There's a third party assessor.
Hmm.
So CompTIA sets the standard. Fort Mesa is supporting in the readiness process, and then there's a third party that's actually scoring the information that we'll collect in the evidence process. So there's a lot of checks and balances here in the system. Um, I think um, I mean, what else? What else is new? I mean, we can let you get off to beer o'clock or whatever's going on at the client site on a Friday afternoon. If I feel informed, because you know what, it's exciting to watch the Starlink trains in the sky, but the
Hmm.
reality is I was lucky enough to have gig fiber. I went from DSL speeds at like 1 megabit to gig fiber about 5 years ago, and I haven't thought about it since.
I
But
mean,
I remember those.
I still don't have fiber in my house, man. In my neighborhood, we still just get coax, and it's pretty good coax. It's gigabit coax, but it's coax. It's not fiber, so
Yeah.
it's not the
Well,
best.
but I've never had the opportunity to really think about how this is changing not just a consumer like home internet experience, but it's actually becoming core infrastructure, right?
Hmm.
So
I mean, in
that's
my personal case, I have my Starlink dish at home, and I have my solar panels, I have my battery. I can be completely off grid, and my customers just heard that, and yes, I can't hide.
so you
I'm 24/7 online connected. There's no way for me to not be online unless there's a huge storm going on and there's so much cloud cover that I can't get any access. And I wanted to share some details. I mean, I haven't had questions about this, but to geek out on the tech a little bit, one of the first things that surprised me the first time I put a Starlink connection up online and speed tested it, it's not just the bandwidth. You would think latency. It's like the other satellite providers that I would try out before SpaceX would have a default like 1,000 milliseconds or 2,000 milliseconds for every request. So even if you get 30 or 40
Mhm.
megs, looks good on paper. The reliability of the internet is complete, nonsense because it's so laggy. SpaceX can actually do less than 100 milliseconds. I don't really know how they're doing that black magic. I've done a little bit of calculations of like the speed of light, right? How long does light take from
Well,
ground to the level where they're flying at? And it does make a little sense of how fast the milliseconds are, but it's really really good. It behaves like if you would have DSL 15 years ago, and it's through a satellite. It's pretty dang.
well, I'm curious what you see on an average day, like through your coaxial system, which is depending on the coding technology that your provider is using. I presume we're talking about a DOCSIS 3.1 if you're getting
Hmm.
giggy.
Mhm.
But like depending on how they code it on the line, we're talking about last mile latency of somewhere between 20, 30, 40 milliseconds, right?
Roughly.
To the local pop.
Mhm.
It can be on the low end if they sacrifice some potential bandwidth on the line. But I think most providers like to overutilize their lines or oversubscribe, and so what you end up with to make room on the cable for all of that is a higher a higher latency because they interleave the coding a little bit differently. So it's like 40 milliseconds or close to it.
Mhm.
And then you've got the island hop back to the East Coast.
Mhm.
So I don't know what that is. Are you guys going through South America or straight to
No,
Miami?
there's cables going to, I believe, Texas, to Florida. There's cables going down to South America as well. Um, I don't know all of them by memory, but
So,
there's
but
quite a
that's got to be another 10 or 20 milliseconds, I would imagine.
yeah, like getting out to somewhere like Azure East US 2 is
Uh-huh.
usually about 80 to 150 milliseconds in total
So
round
so
trip
really
over VPN.
from a latency perspective, Starlink meets or exceeds that, really, which is
It meets
interesting.
it. It meets it. So that's why I say it's remarkably good. So there's a lot of use case about it, and now they have mobile versions of it that you could, throw on your backpack. So if you're a hardcore street warrior like me, you could carry a Starlink
Wait, I've never heard of that
backpack and
before.
throw it on the
But
roof of your car and be
but
connected.
I mean, are they smaller? I thought these
Oh
things
yeah.
were like not backpack
No, no,
friendly.
they've got ones that are really small and you can literally carry on a backpack. They're called mobile. The SKU is mobile something something, but you can carry it with you and you can turn it on whenever you want. You can turn it off when you're not using it. So there's an RV version of it that you can turn on and off, and only use it when you need it through your
Well,
dashboard. So a
you're
lot of
really living in another century because I'm look like believe it or not, I'm looking forward to because in 3 days iOS 18 comes out. And if anyone's not paying attention, that is the day that satellite text messaging becomes available for anyone with an iPhone, or at least anyone in North America with an iPhone, and I think spotty in other territories. I'm not sure what's going to
with,
happen down in
with
Puerto Rico. If
T-Mobile.
they,
Yeah, with T-Mobile. T-Mobile's going to offer that in Puerto Rico.
yes, yeah,
Mhm.
they're going to start offering that as well. But that's even going to be. I think they're going to be offering a superior service probably to what Apple's providing because
Who
I
knows?
think well that
I don't want to start
technology
this
is really
conversation live.
that technology is really interesting because it's using a regular uh, cellular protocol
Hmm.
rather than what Apple does, which is through one of these older satellite messaging protocols that are up in geosync orbit. And so
Hmm.
the result of that is that um, in Apple text, in a pinch, you could get that sent in like 20 seconds or a minute and a half.
Hmm.
T-Mobile should be able to beam it almost the same speed as what you'd expect on a
Regular
normal.
5G. Hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're doing
Yep.
it with SpaceX. T-Mobile is doing the partnership with SpaceX, so they're going to be using the Starlink network for that
All
connectivity.
right.
Hmm.
Well, I've reached the end of my Starlink knowledge base. I'm not an expert in this space, but this was exciting to hear about because I'm a big BCDR geek. Like it's at the core of what we look at in cybersecurity. It's not just the biggest real threat that organizations face these days is that an attacker's going to break in and break something, right? And take them down. And then they're going to be in a situation where they have to figure out how to operate their business and get back to the way it was before, right?
Hmm.
And so, we used to only have to worry about like fire and like storms and like, someone tripping over a cord, and now we have to worry about like this intentional damage. But it's exciting to see that like we're seeing real technology change here that's going to make things easier for people that can get those cloud services. So, um, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for
Oh,
having me.
by the way, RIZQ is a Fort Mesa partner. We do work together. Uh, any message you want to leave behind before we sail into our weekend?
No, man, just keep trucking, people. You know, this is the MSP life is not for everybody. You see me smiling and laughing all the time. I really enjoy what we do. I think the core of MSP is really being a hardcore geek about all these subjects. And if you're not going to have a good time, because the stress is a real thing. So if anybody needs anything, you know how to reach me over LinkedIn. We don't just service Puerto Rico. We do provide service to mainland US, and we have customers with offices in Europe and in South America and Central America as well. So if you guys need anything, just reach out. We're here to solve complex problems. We love complicated problems and make them easy for you guys.
All right. Well, we will be back next week, and Mike Buckcake from Iceberg Cyber is joining us to talk about 5 hidden threats in your client's tech closets. Mike over at Iceberg is, he's in an interesting area of vulnerability management. He's at the forefront of changing the way people prospect with their clients. So using vulnerability detection, vulnerability management to drive client tech investments. So that's going to be an exciting conversation. Until then, enjoy your weekend, everyone. Like, subscribe, share, and thanks for joining another episode of the MSP Cyber Roundtable.
Take care.
Bye.